Before we get into today's episode, um, starting in December with this month, there will be new episodes coming out every week. Every other week will be an interview, and every week between that will be what I'm calling a weird talk, or talking weird. It was inspired by Buddhist dharma talks, so I'll just be pontificating on whatever I feel like for like 15, 20 minutes. Um, so yeah, that's happening. I'm gonna be producing more episodes and enjoy the show. And this is the Vanaheim Vibes podcast. I'm Chloe Tart. With me this week is Gregor and Nicole of the Three Flames Kindred. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourselves and boast about yourselves?
Sure. Well, I'm Gregor Alfwield. Um, I am the Gothi of Three Flames Kindred. Um, my pronouns are he, she, and him, her. Because I am also the priestess of Three Flames Kindred in a manner of speaking. Um, but well, we could talk more about that later. Um, And with Three Flames Kindred is a small kindred of Vanik oriented heathens. We operate in central Texas, and yeah, that's about all that needs to be said.
Awesome. Nicole, do you want to open up about yourself? Do you want to, is there anything you want to introduce yourself on?
Yeah, my name is Nicole. I'm the priestess and or the Githia of Three Flames Kindred. Um, I I would like to say that I think it's an amazing balance that we try to make on a regular basis and a daily basis of being Gothi and Githias in a mainstream world, living very old traditions, balancing full-time jobs, kids, and you know, different cultural challenges along the way. And I'm proud to have a partner that allows me the grace and the beauty of being um, who I am. And I'm proud of myself for finding the path that I'm on now.
Awesome. I would like to actually put a pin on that because I want to talk about that more in depth, but I want to go ahead and start with just how did you both get into heathenry in general? What's the origin story there?
Well, I guess I got into it through music initially. I mean, I've been some kind of pagan ever since I was very young. Um, which was in the '80s, by the way. Uh, so I guess Wicca was most accessible to me probably before I was even a teenager, I guess. So I've been interested in Wicca, and later got into ceremonial magic, the Golden Dawn, Thelema kind of stuff, but um, and experimented with all those things, I guess you would say, but never fully embraced any of those. Um, And then I guess I came upon heathenry, or, well, I was actually a Celtic Reconstructionist before I was a heathen. But I would say I came upon the idea of sort of more folk based religion and folk magic from music, the sort of European um, pagan folk music and whatnot.
And we're talking about like Wardruna and Heilung and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, I mean, though there were, I really like those, but there were sort of bands doing that before those even got famous.
Or I mean, that's what I meant. The style in that
Yeah,
style.
yeah. Like, I was sort of getting into it before those even came on. But like Hagalah's Rune Dance is a good example, um, and some different bands like that. Um, so I don't know. I kind of came into it through that music scene, but then even drifted away from it, or from that. Well, like I say, I sort of got into those things, and they were all very Germanic oriented. But I was at the time more Celtic Druid oriented, and it was a series of, I guess, UPG experiences that brought me to Germanic heathenry. Um, anyway, that's my basic story of getting there. Nicole?
And oh yeah, and Nicole.
Thank you. So my story is a little different. I grew up in fundamental independent Baptist churches and had my children young and raised my children that way. I homeschooled. It was very conservative. But I always knew there was something else going on inside and around me that I couldn't explain. Um, and of course, I was in an environment where I couldn't really speak about it openly because it would open too many um, non kind doors. So as I traveled into my 40s, I had a very ginormous life change. And at that point, I started opening the doors to the pagan world and seeing what spoke to me and what responded to me. And heathenry scared me because of the stigma associated with it across the board. And then I met Freya.
She has a habit of doing that.
She scared me. She scared me, and I was like, I didn't know what to do with that. And she has guided me through so many beautiful things in a short period of time to where I'm at now, that now I understand all of the things I didn't understand 40 years ago, 20 years ago. She explained that to me. And I knew she was always there, just waiting for me to say hello. So my journey's been founded in the last 6 years, and I was able to put my roots down into the Vanic ways, and I'm a very cheerful and joyous and open heathen, and I get to be everywhere I'm at.
Awesome. It sounds like Freya was baked into your first, like right into your experiences,
Yes,
right from the
absolutely.
get go.
Hmm.
Awesome. So that leads me to you, Gregor. What brought you to Freya and the Vanic Way and to these deities?
So that would have been uh, during, I guess I'd been a sort of general heathen, let's see, since 2010 ish or so. Um, and but then I became, I would say, specifically Vanik oriented during COVID. during lockdown. I lived in a house in a neighborhood, but a fairly secluded neighborhood, and I had a big backyard, and I had been doing some heathenish stuff, and I had started kind of orienting myself. I guess I was called by Ingwe Frere first, and that's kind of how our kindred functions. Nicole is primarily connected with Freya, and I would call myself an Ings person to some extent, though I am quite connected to Freya as well. Um, and again, that happened kind of during lockdown during COVID. I was for a lot of time I was pretty all alone. I already had a job where I worked remote, and so I was just at home all day and at home all night. And a few pagan friends would come visit and stuff sometimes, but I wound up having a lot of time to devote to trance work and so on and so forth. And through that, Freya made herself very apparent during that time. I can bring up, I'll try to briefly explain two very intense experiences with that. Um, One of the times I was doing this trance work, and she came to me in a vision, and she basically poured mead over my whole the property where I was staying, over the house in the backyard. She poured mead over the whole thing, and sorry, that was she who shall not be named. Uh, anyway, and I took this as like like, because like I said, COVID was going on, and so she poured this mead over the whole place, and I took it as a feeling of like she was protecting my space. And that actually made me very scared. I was like, well, if she's protecting this, what do I need to be protected from? I later learned, just through living there, what she was doing was blessing the space. And that is where our kindred formed at the end of 2020. Um, so there was that. And then I also had an experience where I was sitting around a fire with my drum, and I was singing a particular song that's devoted to her, which we'll bring up in a bit because that's our one for the playlist.
Ooh.
And I was singing it, and we had feral cats in the neighborhood. And um, as I was singing the song, one of those cats, who I had had a small tiff with over gardening, he kept getting into my plants, and I would scare him away. But he appeared and sat next to me at the fire, and I kind of just went with it and kept singing the song. And next thing I knew, another one of the feral cats in the neighborhood came and sat around the fire too. And I'm like, okay, something's happening now, right? And then, as you might guess, as these things go in threes, a third cat showed up to listen to me sing around the fire. And I was like, okay, I guess this place is definitely blessed and definitely devoted to Freya. Um, and I should explain that the name of Three Flames Kindred is also about Freya. We
Golveg being burned
yes,
3 times.
Mm-hmm.
we do assume. I know it's not everybody doesn't, but we do hold that Golvig is a name of Freya, and that is her in that part. So yeah, it's the three flames that burn her, and of course then make her shine even brighter and brighter. So Freya is the foundation of our kindred. Um, Even though I am probably slightly more devoted to her twin brother, um, they they're also kind of inseparable. So it's kind of even weird to say that.
Right, right. Like Freyr just seems like I'm mostly dedicated to Freya, but Freyr never never feels uncomfortable just butting in.
Right, right. They're twins, and
Yeah, he does that.
they go together, like So I definitely would say I started out devoted to him, but now I mean, I think I even called myself an Ings Gothi for a while, but now I've changed it to just Vana Gothi because I am just devoted to the Vanir in general. He got me started because there were also visions during before that time that were related to him, but I'll since you're oriented toward Freya, I'll talk about that mostly.
No, no, no. I want you to bring up Freyr. I want you to. I want you to expand. Like I was really hoping we would expand on the Vonic deities here, and if you want to go for it, I'm going to fully encourage you to do so.
Okay. I mean, I will say he's a little more abstract, I guess. So I don't know. My experiences with him are a little harder to talk about, so I might evade that a little bit. Not because I don't want to talk about it, but I don't know how. Um, that sort of super powerful, mystical-y stuff that's really hard to explain.
Well, the beautiful part about a podcast is that we can always do another one once you figure out your feelings.
That's fair. But we, as a kindred, we do, and we like I say, we started in earnest in Yule of 2020. So the end of 2020, and we've been going solid ever since. And we hit all the Vanic deities. No deity left behind, for sure. But and in fact, we have sort of begun where we've come to orient the seasonal holy days, which we do the eightfold wheel of the year kind of thing, but we have our own take on each holy day, and most of those have a deity that we focus on, and most of those are goddesses actually. So, in fact, I guess Ingsbloat is the only one that's a god. Now that I think about it, um, we don't give Njord a specific holy day, but part of that is because we don't live by the ocean. We definitely do acknowledge him and honor him, but we feel like to do a full bloat to him, we would need to be at the ocean, and we aren't. So so we don't do that. But we do Nerthus, and we consider Idun an Vanic goddess, and Sif as well. We have a whole, I guess, for the sort of second harvest time, we call that Sif's bloat, and we honor her. Freya gets Walpurgisnacht, of course.
Of course, Night of Witches.
Right. And in February, we do our version of Charming of the Plow, but that's devoted to Gareth. Um, and did I just cover them all? I wasn't even necessarily meaning to do that, but I guess I did. Gareth Bloat, Iduna Bloat. Um, we call it Hexen Bloat, but it is devoted to. We honor Freya as basically the first to teach magic, right? And then Nertha Bloat is our version of Midsummer, and then Ings Bloat is the sort of first harvest festival, and then Sif's Bloat is the next. And then we do Alpha Bloat, but we don't actually meet as a kindred for that. We recommend that people do that as a hearth cult thing in their own homes because that is traditionally how that would have been done.
Oh, really? I would like. I have not looked into the Like I just assumed that the specifics just weren't there for like knowing these things.
Well, and indeed they're kind of not, right? With especially with Alpha Bloat, we just know, right, that it did exist and that it was to honor the ancestors, and that from the one of the accounts that we have, it was a Christian showing up to a village, right? And the people in the village turn him away, and he's like, "Well, but you're supposed to give me hospitality." And they're kind of like, "Well, yeah, normally we would, but this is Alpha Bloat, and outsiders aren't allowed, so you need to go somewhere else." And so we know from that that it's a home based um, uh, type of thing. So we don't actually meet as a kindred for that. We do things in our own homes for that. And then Yule, we used to do a Yule, and we kind of would just pick a different. That was our wild card time, and we would pick a different deity. We've honored Uller.
Hmm.
We honored Kvasir last year, and we were going to honor Njord this year, but we wound up. I think I mentioned it to you even. We wound up moving into an apartment away from that place with the big backyard that this whole thing started at. And so we've decided to not do our own Yule anymore. We wind up every Yule anyway. We wind up going to a bunch of other kindred's Yule things, and we play music for these things sometimes when we're invited, and maybe give talks and maybe help them with their rituals. So we've kind of decided to focus on Yule time as our sort of outreach time. Um,
Community.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Because that was definitely like the thing we do know about Yule was that it was definitely community oriented.
That's for sure. So we've kind of moved toward focusing on going outward more for that. Um,
And especially because there's so many people in this community in Texas that have come and honored us with their presence, that if we're always only attending our own events, then we're never supporting them as well. And we have a lot of wonderful kindreds here that embody the tradition of true heathenry and acceptance and inclusion. And we want to respect that and grow that in other communities. Since Texas is 6 hours wide in any direction from Central Texas, it's a big place. And we want people to know they have that option no matter where they live.
So it's like forming that it is building that local growth.
100%.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the thing I put a pin on earlier, I want to go ahead and go back to that. Um, because I want to get um I want to get both of your takes on this, but one of the things that I took away from the Vanir was a sense of self empowerment. That who you are, being yourself in this world is important.
Hmm.
Um, and from a Ingvi's prayer perspective, what does that look like, and what does that look like from a more whole Vanic perspective?
So I will say for myself personally, being somebody who's more neutral to the traditions, um, as I looked at different aspects of heathenry, I had already found myself somebody who, when I walk out the front door, I'm greeted by bugs. It could be a walking stick. It could be anything. It could be a pretty bush. I was just drawn to nature. I was an avid trail runner for years, and I didn't realize how spiritually healing that was for me. And in that, in being in nature, I also felt like I found my true self. There was less work that needed to be done, I feel like, on myself because I knew that how I was planted, the seed that I came from, and how I grew was exactly who I needed to be. And I feel that being a Vanik heathen and carrying on those traditions um, has allowed me to be more of an accepting person. It has allowed me to be a better stepmother. after raising two of my own, I now get to participate in Gregor's two beautiful children. I'm a kinder person because even though nature can be harsh, um,
The
everything
shade will
has,
still the
yeah,
tree will still give you shade and fruit.
absolutely. And so that is, for me, that's a lot of where my foundation as a Vanik heathen came to play, was just because when I walked out the door every day, I was greeted with a smile and a gift, no matter where I was or what I was doing, from nature. And that's animism. That is animism in a little nutshell.
That radical understanding that the world out there is something that we can coexist with,
Mhm.
that we draw energy from and put energy back into.
I completely agree with you. I can't take from it unless I'm willing to offer something back.
Bingo. I mean, when we breathe, we put out CO2, which feeds the plants.
Correct.
That
It's
send
gift
us
for
oxygen back. Yeah.
yeah, it's gift for a gift.
Yeah. It's a coexisting world. And if I move a rock in a river, I have changed the way that river flows. I've changed its ecological system. The fish now flow in a different place. The frogs now lay in a different way. It's not just me taking a rock. So,
It's a radical upheaval of life.
agreed.
And that's empowering because um, we, well, there's a lot that could be said about this, but I'll try to summarize it as we used to all be that way, and we used to all understand that, and then we didn't all understand that, and to re-embrace the the animistic aspects that she's talking about. That is empowering because it is becoming ourselves again, and we that's kind of as a kindred. We exist as a kindred just for building community locally and whatever, but we also hope to exist as an example of how we can remember who I was about to say relearn. We don't even have to learn it. We just have to remember it. That we are interconnected with everything, that we can embrace everything around us as and live in right relation with and know that everything around us isn't even all that we see. I mean, everything that we see is important, and there's even more than that. There's just this whole living, vibrant community of life around us that we can participate with, and that's to re-embrace that is well, that's to me anyway, at least my outlook. That is where empowerment stems from at its base. Um, Now you had
Just
asked about that specifically. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to summarize, just recognizing that your own power comes from just being in the world and being placed in the world.
And the connections you're able to make with the world. Yeah, absolutely. And we've, for various reasons, like I said, there's a lot that could be said about it, but I think mostly, at least people in the West, have been cut off from that. Um, Again, I just I really feel honed in on the word embrace. We have been taught not to embrace, and that to return to embracing all of that, everything around us, and those connections is it's a good thing. Of course, you also asked specifically, what does that look like from an Ingwe Freya perspective and from a Freya perspective. Um, for the Freya part, because I have a thought on that, is from the section in the Voluspa where we're introduced to Ulve, right? Which again we assume is Freya. I know everybody doesn't, but our whole deal is founded on that assumption. Um, it says that she. They usually translate it as she is a delight to evil women, right? The Old Norse is Ilrar Brudar, but it literally kind of means evil brides or bad brides. So, but as I dug into that word itself, it really means um, it's more specific than that. It means doesn't women who don't fit into normal social conventions, right? And it because it kind of literally means like they're bad brides because they would not make a good bride. So she comes and does magic, and then she delights them, right? So you imagine this goddess just like wandering around doing her magic, and basically the weirdo ladies go, "Oh, I want to be like her," right? you know, and so I think we get that indication there, right? I mean, people talk about hedge witches, and I think you know heathenry existed, and it wasn't all Vanek, but I think some of it was specifically. We know this somewhat from place names, that there were places that would have been devoted to Freyr or to Freya.
And I was gonna say we also have the Freyr cult.
Exactly right, which I guess it was Bede that brought that up. And so we know that there was various, and then we have various Gothies and Githias that are named for Ing or Freyr. So I think we can pretty well surmise that there was Vanek specific cultists, and it probably existed um, even when Christianity had taken over, right? Because they would have been off in the woods. And I often think they were the hedge witches, which part of really all a hedge witch is that person who they kind of live off in the woods, but they can still interact with people, and people still go to them. They're kind of scared of them, but then when they need something, they go ask them to do some magic for them, right? And anyway, that Freya absolutely, well, both of them, Freya and Freyr, are that to me. Just don't fit into society, but they can be in society, right? Like they exist in that liminal space, but kind of they're basically the weirdos. So
Right, like Freyr's supposed to be this paragon of masculinity, but he gives up his sword for love.
Hmm.
well,
Right.
and that's a whole. I mean, the gender aspects of that are also empowering. I think both of them don't do what you would expect from sort of standard gender expectations, right? Um, Freya, of course, pines for Other, and that you might expect. But then, anytime it winds up happening a couple of times. Some giant wants to get in bed with her, and she is filled with rage, right? So she can express, and then of course she's associated. Although I don't make too much of this, but she's associated somewhat indirectly with battle and whatnot, and we tend to associate that with masculinity. And then yeah, Freyr, right? He's pining for Gareth, which some people, traditionally we would think of a woman as doing that, and but he
Yeah, some even say he's simping.
right, and that's considered a bad thing. But and that's other than the part in the Voluspa about the Aesir Vanir War, to me the Skirtis Mall is one of the most sacred texts that I can attach to. I mean, it's just there's layers and layers of so many wonderful things, but one of them is that love matters, and we're learning that from this hyper masculine phallic deity, right? Um, so, and of course, then there's you brought up the Frere cult, and of course they're mentioned as dancing femininely, right? Um,
Right.
Now we don't know exactly what that means. I mean, that's a Christian saying that, so it could have been they were just doing normal pagan stuff, and he just thought that was effeminate. But I don't know. I like to think that there was some various types of gender bending going on there, and whatnot, and so the Vanir are empowering for us with that in this day, and I think they were in that day too. Um, just undermining um, standard social conventions, and again, and that's what empowerment is about too. And the original question was about being yourself. I mean, that's essentially what they're saying is, who cares what
Yeah, and
society expects? Just if love is what matters, go for it. If you're angry, do that. You know. Um, but
it
anyway,
was what Njord was talking about during Lucasen was like, no, who cares? Who cares what Freya's been up to? Freya's been up to. It's not
oh
your
right.
business. Yeah,
Well, and even there too, Tyr takes up for him for Freyr right after that part, and he says, you know, he loosens people from their bonds, and he makes not men's women to, other men's wives to. He makes not maidens to cry. Um, so that we hone in on that a lot. That the Vanir are about liberation and being free, and free again, free to be ourselves, right? Um, and not to say that heathenry isn't about that in general, I suppose, but I think the Vanir are very focused on that, and a source of power and inspiration for the weirdos in the
right.
group.
Well, because like when you go to Odin, you have to wonder what's Odin's agenda. But when you go to Freyr or Freya, their agenda is you. Their agenda is how can we get you on a better path.
Well, we've also found traditionally with the connections we've have with other kindreds that we tend to bring the music, which is a whole nother transical state of mind. And people are always surprised at what a drum will do, what a hum, what a song will do. And it really does allow Freya to do her work very profoundly when she has music. And we're always honored to see that when other people have never seen it before because we're so used to having it. And that's something like when we travel at Yule, that's something that we get to do for other kindreds.
And they want it.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we like to exist in our Vanic oriented space, but if we only do that in a bubble, it just becomes kind of vacuous. So we enjoy going to more standard Asatru oriented groups. And again, they very much want us there, right? They look at us and go, yes, come and play music at our thing because we don't have that,
Hmm.
but we know we need that, right? And I feel like we live the truce between the Aesir and the Vanir quite often. Like it's not a, or I don't want it to be. I guess I could see myself getting kind of jaded and cynical and becoming this way, but so far that hasn't happened to me, and I'm grateful. But I could see somebody going down a rabbit hole of, well, I don't want to have anything to do with society at all, and I don't want to have anything to do with those Aesir people because they're all brositrues, and I don't want anything to do with that. But then the experience we have is that we show up, and yeah, sometimes they're a little like, okay, these guys are kind of weird, but we get to bring a gift to them,
You
which
get to bring the
is
funky jams.
we get to bring
Exactly.
we literally bring the funky jams, and they know that that needs to exist for a fully fleshed out heathenry in a communal sense to exist. Um, so it's always a beautiful thing. We have not yet, of course, we intentionally avoid, um, and we have to be careful and whatnot with the more racist elements do exist, and we make sure to avoid all that. And they definitely exist around here. Um, so we have to do a lot of work to find out who those are and not show up to that. But luckily, we've succeeded at that, and we have never had bad experiences. We always go and we're welcomed, and we love what's going on, and we bring the funky jams and everybody's happy. So
Because it seems to me that Frith is meant to be lived.
yeah,
Yes.
That Frith is meant
Yeah.
to be experienced, not just built like a Lego structure, and you just put it away. It's like a computer. You're supposed to get your keyboard dirty. You're supposed to get into it.
Well, and it's one of those quotes where it talks about a friend, that a true friend, the grass does not grow upon the path. And it works both ways. And that's Frith. That's interaction. That's creating a family. That's creating a foundation, a culture.
Exchanging energy like you would in the real world, like you would out in the world with the rocks and the trees.
Uh huh.
100%. Yeah, and like I say, I could see myself, and I could imagine somebody like it's very tempting sometimes. The memes are out there, right? I'm so tempted to go move out in the woods and avoid everybody, right? I mean, there is that temptation, but I don't think I tend to see the Vanir as a balancing pantheon group of deities, I guess you would say. They are not a polar opposite. I mean, I guess in a way, the polar opposite is the Jotnar and the Aesir,
Right.
although it's more complicated than that too. But the Vanir are that in between thing, and they don't suggest just hide out in your hidey hole in the woods, right? They suggest, in fact, that's right. That's the whole thing. Ulve goes to the Aesir, and she's like, "Hey, how's it going, guys?" And of course, at first they're like, "Whoa, what are you doing here? We're gonna attack that," and it doesn't work. And then eventually they're like, "Hmm, we couldn't burn her and we couldn't stab her. Maybe we want some of what they got," you know.
And there's a
And
little persistence in that, in not just showing up and being unapologetically yourself, but doing so under fire. And in this
yep,
case, literal
Exactly.
fire.
yes, right. Well, and we kind of, we there's obviously myth is layered, and there's different ways to take things, but one of the ways we take the three flames is that it is that the flames are trying to live this animistic life, this embracing life in the fires and the ruins of the world around us, that's trying to make us not do that. You Again, that obviously those flames symbolize many things, but that's just one of them. Um, but you also can't do that in a running away. You have to engage with that, not run away.
And I just want to go ahead and start bringing things to a close because we are at 45 minutes. Um, and I apologize, but if I do want to have you on back again at some point so that way we can continue the conversation because
Sure.
this is an amazing conversation. I just want to go ahead and before we get to the playlist, I just got to know, Mimir, did he deserve it?
Hmm.
I mean, we're all Vanek here. We can all
Yeah,
say
yeah.
it. We can all say it. He deserved it.
Um, yes, and I do. There is a take on that. I think it was a joke. And the joke, the reason, the punchline of the joke was that he's not actually dead anyway because we're the Vanir and we can teach you how to bring him back,
Oh
right?
yeah,
So, and they let uh, um, is it Honir? I'm having a brain fart for a
yeah,
second.
Onir.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They let he's beautiful but stupid, right? So the Vanir let him live because they can't attack beauty, right? Because beauty is what's so important. But he's an idiot, and so they attack the one that's wise but ugly. But again, the joke is on Odin, right? Or on the East. It's like we're gonna chop his head off and send him back. But ha ha ha! Here's the magic on how to bring him back, and you can still talk to him anyway.
Right.
I see it as a prank, right? Um, a joyful, fun prank that they pulled. Um,
So
but did
let's
he
go.
deserve it? Sure.
So let's go ahead and get into the playlist entry. So you said you had the song that you want to go ahead and add. Uh, let's go ahead and bring it up. Or
Okay.
not. Um, is it available on YouTube?
It is.
Perfect. And
Um, it is called. It is about Freya specifically, and it's called Lady of the Vanir.
by Fire and Ice.
Yeah. Now I do have to say that the woman who wrote it is Alice Carl's daughter. She actually lives in Texas, and we've met her and heard her sing this song around the fire. But the recording of it is through that other project, Fire Plus Ice.
Oh, let me go ahead and add that to the playlist, and we will be good to go from there.
Okay,
Thank you both so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
thank you.
And again, we will have you again, and we will talk more because you guys are awesome. You folks are awesome. Because I didn't even get into the gender stuff because like the thing I wanted to talk about was like, um, do you feel as if well, actually we can talk about it still. We got like 5 minutes. I just don't want to go over an hour because over an hour podcasts are just the worst.
Fair.
But Odin practicing Save and then being, called Ittergi for it. Um, do you like in that invitation to practice? Do you feel that same energy?
We we tap, well, we walk lightly, we tread lightly on say their work. It's a very interpersonal thing. It is something that we do know that happens to, you've got Freya as a vulva. You've got all these different things and all these different terms that can be used. Um, but it really is something that we tend to keep extremely private and extremely close to us because of the kind of doors that it can open.
Ah,
So we tread lightly on that still to this day, because we haven't been given a specific invitation to be able to go forward broader with it.
Understandable. I just wanted to bring that up because to me that's where my brain immediately went with all the gender stuff.
Well, I do. I mean, I I think this is fairly universal for. So I'll state something somewhat um, clearly, but I think that a certain amount of gender bending is required to do magic, and I will say required.
Yes.
And that's the strong thing that I'm saying. I think many people would maybe disagree with that, but I tapping into that liminal space is a requirement to tapping into the liminal space of accessing the worlds. So I don't know. I'll just leave it at that. And Odin was able to tap into that space, and but he was only able to do so because our gods taught him how to do it.
But we wouldn't expect it to be just a girl thing or just a boy thing. We would expect it to be able to be done by somebody who was willing to do what, like Gregor asked, to be able to bend to
And
what's
seek with
needed. Mm-hmm.
and go within and really struggle with self.
And we think I find that that's a lot where the block is for people, because a lot of people in society are just like, you're either this or you're that. It doesn't always work that way, and not everything's green in the sense of green. There's many greens.
And not just that, but there's also many different kinds of light.
Yep.
Yep.
So, and on that note, I want to go ahead and end, and I want to go ahead and bring us to a close. If you want to go ahead and join us on Discord, you can find our link on everheartempire.com. If you want to be on the podcast, just go ahead and shout me out. And as always, I truly otar, oh Senor. Have a good day.